Black Men Cry Too is an invitation for men of color to feel safe to unpack their hurt and share their truth. This space was created as an invitation for men of color to feel empowered to know it's okay that they can cry too.
It's always important to prune the shrubs. It makes the house look bigger. Another way that Manscaped has saved me, it's definitely made it look bigger by shaving. If you use the Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer, it's waterproof. You could use it in the shower, and it works amazing. If you use BlackMenCryToo, that's TOO, you'll get 20% off and free shipping. Your balls will thank you. Peace.
I took it up to the 617. So we're hanging out in Mass, and I have the pleasure to sit down with a doctor today. Hey Doc, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Let's kick it off. Whew. So Doc.
Yes.
What inspired you to study psychology?
So being a first generation Haitian man, there's definitely been differences between my upbringing and my parents' upbringing. Of course, them both growing up in Haiti and living a majority of their lives there, and then immigrating to the US and raising their firstborn child and firstborn male in this new country. They definitely had their values and their plans in place that weren't going to change, and that oftentimes went against the grain with the dominant culture of America. And so there were a lot of things that my American, white, even Hispanic friends were doing when I was growing up, that even black friends were doing growing up, that I wasn't allowed to do. And so that has always been interesting to me. My parents have also taken in foster children when growing up, and so
they foster black kids, Asian kids?
All
Okay.
of all ethnic backgrounds. And so with that being said, I learned from an early age that like not everyone has the same like upbringing as you. It's kind of thought that like it's like it is on TV that like if someone lives in your neighborhood, they all have the same resources and all of that as you. And so from a young age, I learned that like somebody else's like mom and dad weren't always doing what they were supposed to be doing, and needed assistance in that. And so that's where my parents stepped in. So from that time, I felt like I also wanted to like pour into other people and help people out. So that's where it originated. And then of course, as things progressed throughout my life, I definitely grew my passion for psychology.
And would you say that's part of the reason why Black mental health and adolescent has been like more of your focus throughout your studies?
I would absolutely say that. So again, being like within this culture, of course, like all of us are here, all of us are human, X, Y, and Z. But it seems that like black men definitely have another and a different experience, and so much so that in psychology they're the least likely to attend therapy, and the least to see it out. And so with that being said, I feel like it's an area that isn't studied often. Men's mental health in general is not studied often because there's not a lot of male participants. So that has been my focus, and just trying to get men to understand that like they too can cry. I feel like just with that statement that like black men cry too is important. One, to validate, right? And to let them know that like you can also cry too, and to let other people know that like we're not all and always these like strong and brute and like emotionless or like animals like people have made us out to be, that we too have emotions, that we too are happy and sad and feel jealousy and guilt and giddy and so on and so forth.
Why do you think black men specifically have been conditioned to have that idea that that's the way that they should behave, and they're not allowed to be vulnerable, and that's not an option for them.
Yeah, it's like it's both conditioned and socialized, right? So like in a social setting, they're not even allowed to do that. That like you walk into an establishment, a party, a graduation party where everyone's supposed to be celebrating, and typically or stereotypically, the black men in the room are kind of like
Acting quick.
yeah,
It's
like
it's whatever.
it's whatever. And like growing up in that era where it's like whatever, I would say the generation now, the upcoming generation now has more leeway with that like they're allowed to like talk about their emotions, and mental health is a part of their like everyday conversations. But yeah, growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, it was everything was cool, everything's cool, everything like everything is chill, like in that sense, not too good, not too bad, it's just like chill. And so the reasons why I think we are actually socialized is it's brought down from generation to generation, and then when you step out of that, your manhood is at stake, right? That often people feel like, men in general, but black men especially, feel like, well, if I cry, people are going to think that I'm a woman, or people might think that I'm gay, like, God forbid that
You be human.
right, that you be human and show emotions. But one could say that like black men are not looked on to like be successful or have any of these emotions, or like looked on for anything other than just like being black man, so very low on the totem pole. But then on the other end, when it comes to like strength and it comes to being like dominant, they're looked on to be very high. So it's like, why can't a black man be somewhere in the middle, or like, which they are, but we're not socialized to be that way. So it's like, we call the world itself at times seems like it calls on black men to be what it wants black men to be. And so like, if we want you to be an athlete, you need to be an athlete, and if we need you to sing or rap, then you need to sing or rap. We don't care if you're in school, we don't care if you're a fashion designer, we don't care about these like we don't care if you are a plant dad, so on and so forth. That like, we care when you're entertaining us, and we care when you're providing our need for something, whether that be protection, or whether that be providing us with children that may provide us with a need, so on and so forth. So there's the school to prison pipeline that we're all definitely aware of. And so there's many things that happen from the day we're born that kind of socialize us to that, right? Like, don't pick up the baby too much, like, or like, that boy's gonna be a man one day, like, let's not do that. It happens within our own culture, right? Like, regardless of if you're Haitian, Jamaican, or so on and so forth. And it's kind of, when the mother in the situation, or the sister tries to baby or show love, right? It's like, oh, that child's gonna be a man one day, like, you can't do that, or you can't be too soft. It also tells you what kind of world that black man's going to go into, where he's not allowed to be soft. And so from that point on, you can't raise them for a world that they're not going to be in, which is sad to say.
And it kind of makes sense when you run into men who still struggle to be emotional, and we're looking at them like, dude, that was 2 decades ago. Why aren't you here with us and involved with us? But like you said, they've never been trained to step into that world or encouraged.
Right. And trained, encouraged, socialized, so on and so forth. And so it's definitely sad, because and some people are raising their children differently, of course, but especially with black men, that they face this, because then it's also like, oh, well, my family allows me to do this, why doesn't your family allow you to do that? And it's like, oh, because they said like I need to be a man, or they said that they need help with all of these things. And as we know, black children grow up way too fast, and so it's especially black boys, because of either the things that they get into, or either the things that they're socialized to get into, which is like fighting and like, quote unquote, like gang activity and so on and so forth. That like, that is their place, rather than like education, and being one that like went on the educational path, or walked the educational path, I should say, yeah, it wasn't like made for me. It wasn't constructed for me. I didn't have a place there, but I definitely had to like make my lane, and then hopefully other people can follow that lane as well.
I want to talk a little bit more about that lane. What was your experience learning psychology, being a Black man, and then even being taught about the Black community? Like, was there anything that was shocking to learn?
Well, again, so there's not an extensive amount of research that's out there, but what was shocking to learn is that there's words for all of the things that we're experiencing, so it's very validating. So you think of something like acculturation. So that difference between the Haitian dominant, the Haitian culture and the American culture, and me going through what I was going through during my upbringing, like things like sleeping over a friend's house, which is like unheard of in the Haitian community. That's a piece, and so things. The term is acculturative stress that one is going through, right? And so it's the stress of like trying to balance between the two. The two cultures. And so like, yes, your culture is actually dominant because that's the household you're living in. When you go to see family, that's what's happening. But then there's this other side of when I'm at school and they're like, why can't you sleep over? Or like, why are you eating sugar cane and drinking a beer at like lunch?
12.
And I'm like, this is Malta. Like, it's not a beer, but like that's what it's looking to the point where when that did happen, the sugar cane was fine, but the teacher did look to see like if I was drinking a beer, and I'm like, you don't even know what Malta is. But like it made me feel like, okay, like this is not even like no one even knows what I'm eating or like chewing into like a bag with the sugar cane. And so like, or like canepas or caneps or whatever you would like to call it, even the foreign fruit that I would have wasn't something that my white peers were exposed to.
And for the research aspect of it, why aren't Black men involved in these research, and why is it so important to have more involvement so we can learn more?
Loaded question. So let me just go for the jugular with the first one. So we're distrusting of the system, and we should be, right? So before, when Black men have previously been engaged in this research, they were given syphilis, or they were led astray during these studies, or oftentimes they didn't capture the nuances of the study that they could have captured during this. And what I mean by saying that is everyone, for the most part, especially when we're talking about research from, let's even say 2010 and in the past, it African American men means Haitian men and Jamaican men and Trinidadian men instead of Trinidadian Haitian men instead of like
Black American,
right,
African American,
exactly.
Caribbean American.
Right, and so all of it is just African American. So like a part of me always is like, is this like African American like
from Africa,
like blacks from? But like in that context, they refer to themselves as like Nigerian American rather than like African American. And so like, is everyone referring to them like that? Mm-hmm. And with the research and knowing the nuances, people are like, well, what's the difference? And so I'm like, okay, are Irish and Italian people the same? And they're like, no, absolutely not. And I'm like, okay, there you go. And that gets like people thinking about it that like don't understand like what's the big deal with the difference, because like all the cultures are different, and there's definitely cultural values, religious values, so on and so forth that are important for us to consider during that. I would say another reason is it's not a focus in our community, right? So therapy isn't a focus, participating in research isn't a focus. Even so, like you have me going to school. I was for a long period of time, I was one of 2 Black people there, and with that being said, I was the only Black male ahead of me or behind me for like 3 years.
Wow.
And so that's a doctorate program. And of course, that the bachelor's experience was totally different. But when we're talking about a doctorate program, or even talking about a master's program, same thing. There was actually Yeah, actually, same thing. One black woman and myself. And so, and we're just talking about clinical psychology, right? As myself, I'm a clinician that talks one-on-one therapy with someone. So then that takes me away from being able to do the research, doing the testing, doing all of that, or like writing the books, and some may say like even being engaged in these type of conversations more, because I'm spread thin throughout like what I want to do, and I know where my passion is, and I'm just starting out. So figuring out my lane within this, especially that the lane isn't mapped out, because like, oh, my grandfather has done this before, like my uncle is also in the same field, or I even know another person that looks like me that is in this field that has done it previously. I think he was a part of my dissertation team, and he spoke, and he was 4 years older than I was. And I don't even know 4 years older. He attained his degree about 4 years before I did, and so he's still in his like mid-30s, and he's also doing one-on-one therapy. And so like, who's going to write the research? Who's going to like gather all these people together and be the face? Because right, if I come to ask you to be involved in my research, and it's not someone that you can relate to or see yourself looking like, then why would you participate? Is often is often what happens. Or it's kind of like, I don't care to.
Why is it important that we are involved in these research? Because like you said, we're not trusting. So how can you get us to trust it, and why should we?
I would say being involved is just going to help us, especially when we talk about Black psychology and Black mental health as a whole. So the more we're involved on every aspect, right? So providing that you're even a test taker or you're an instructor, like that has to be involved in the study. You're a coder within the study, that you're the person even greeting the person. There's an element of like security when it comes to Black people seeing another Black person, especially when you're in a distrusting environment. And so, of course, there are other Black people that participate in the studies, and they've worked through whatever they need to work through to participate. But that's still like, let's say there's 100,000 white or Hispanic people that participate in the study, and then you get 5,000 Black people to participate in the study. That's huge. And so one way would be by just spreading the word that like this is just going to help promote us, and we get to learn more about like our environment and our people by doing that. So let's say the studies on Black depression, like is there Black depression, is it different? And it's like, well, yes, because they're socialized to be different, and so there's going to be different things that work. So then later on, somebody else who develops treatment manuals, that's a Black person or interested in Black psychology, can then develop that treatment manual, and now we can add that a exercise needs to be incorporated because Black people tend to feel depression more physically. Let's just say that was one of the findings, and then you would know that. Or Black people need to figure out a way to be in a working environment that's inclusive, because the racism that happens at work is what's damaging and significantly influences Black depression. But we don't know what it is or what it is for a group of people. And so that is all necessary, because then we could start like tackling these things, but we don't know.
It kind of made me think about, like you had said, when we talked about work and feeling more inclusive, or even when we used to talk about therapy back then and it was only made for like, if you're crazy or something's wrong with you. It's literally everything that we are saying, like you don't understand me, so you don't know how to speak to me or have me in the same places. We're our own sort of like enemies in a sense, because we held each other back because we weren't doing these studies. We weren't having these conversations, so we're mad at how the world was treating us, but we weren't letting anyone help us so we can be treated better.
And partly it's like we weren't letting anyone help us, but like no one was there to help us as well, right? And within that, even like because like white males also go through, they're the least likely to also go to therapy as well, or like to end early, but also they have a lot of stress, like when you look at the research, because like they're held to this pedestal that like, oh, you're a white man, you have everything handed to you, what are you suffering, like what are you suffering, yeah, like and what are you suffering, and all of these things are like within your power to change, and you're not changing anything. So like the amount of pressure that they even feel is crazy. But like not to get too much into that, but to say that like each one of us are going through our own like inner battles. But like especially when you think about the Black community, that's all right. They're supposed to be the man of the house, and they're also going through racism, and they're not making as much as their peers, and they're in this white dominant society for the most part. The more we can be engaged in therapy, we know that it works, and we know that it's going to help us along the way. And other people would say that like, oh, that's like a thing that like women do, or that's a thing that like white people do. And unfortunately, it's not like, oh, that's a thing that like Black men do. But like sports is, right? Or like gang banging or rapping is like a thing that Black men do, but like therapy is not. So the more we can like flip that like narrative and that script, it would be best. Like, oh, you go to therapy? Like, yeah, like I go to therapy too. And like my homeboy goes to this therapist, says like she or he is real good. Because like you pointed out, that like some people feel like, oh, it's just crazy people that go to therapy. No, happy people also go to therapy because they need to maintain their happiness. People that are grieving need to go to therapy because of that. Or people that are in like a transition in their life, and they really need to like start thinking these things out, and they want to think more clearly about these things. It's not just like quote unquote crazy people. And what crazy people used to mean is people that are hallucinating, or people that have delusions. But now crazy is just like someone that lacks boundaries, right? That like pulls up to your work, like, oh, they're crazy. No, they lack boundaries, but you've probably also done some things to make them quote unquote crazy. Right. And so the stigmas that come with therapy, that's across the board. But you also know Black people are what's the word? I don't want to say founders, but are
innovators.
We control the cancel culture, and so it was like before cancel culture started, it was like therapy canceled, right? And now we're trying to like bring it back, but there's little nuances that like, oh no, only crazy people go there, or like, damn, you that depressed, like you trying to like kill yourself, and it's like, okay, what if I was like, do you think saying that made me feel better? Or it's like, no, they're in therapy, like, you might wanna, like, they got a lot of demons. And it's like, okay. Same thing with like church, and this will be, because it's Sunday, I'll bring my religious spiel into it, but like people think like if you're going and attending church, especially religiously and traditionally every Sunday, that like somehow you're holier than thou. It's like, no, I'm a sinner just like the next one, and it's like, that's why I need to be there. And so same thing with therapy, like there's a lot of things going on in my life, so that's why I need to be there. And the more we can look at it that way, the more people hear us speak about these things, even again with BlackMenCryToo, like they'll be able to say like, okay, like these things will be normalized. And so like when, I mean, how often have you seen like a girl like wipe away a few tears like on a train or whatever, and it's been like, oh, okay, like and it's been like, oh, okay, like she had a rough day, maybe I'll say something, maybe I won't. But like to see a Black man do that, like, and like, do I like, yeah, I'm not saying anything because like that's foreign, and like it's almost like when Black men cry, like something is going on. But like something's always going on. Maybe that's why he's finally crying. And it would be great for you to actually say something during that time. And crying, when we think about it, is like a physiological response and reaction. And so it needs to happen. It's like cleansing. Like, you ever have that like good cry and it comes out? Like,
so I never used to be one of those people until 2020 hit, and I've been in the shower like, wow, this is what they've been talking about. This is amazing.
Right.
But then it also makes me think about how a lot of Black men, like, it's almost the same thing. The last time I cried was when my grandmother died. It's always the same
Because you can
thing.
cry during death, but like make sure you wrap that up in like 2 to 3 days, because like then you're gonna have a problem. Like it's like
You're doing too much
you're
now.
doing
Like,
too much.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm just grieving.
Right. But what happens is, and for many people, is that these things start to pile up, right? So then somebody has a grandmother's death, then somebody also is talking about like not getting the job they wanted, but now like they are late on like their cell phone bill, and then they just drop their phone and like crack their like screen, and then they didn't get this the sneakers on the sneakers app, like, and then like they may find themselves crying over like not getting a pair of sneakers, but it's like they're not crying over their sneakers, but like they're crying over everything else. And then they're like, damn, I need to tighten up. No, you need to like
let it out.
Let it out. Catharsis. So that's like another word that I didn't know like before this, but catharsis is just like letting it out, and exposing yourself to that.
So I kind of want to switch gears a little bit. We've briefly talked about white people a few times. You went to a PWI.
Correct. All of them, from kindergarten on. Yeah.
Damn.
Yes.
Wow. I was going to ask how
PWI.
that experience is, but I want to also focus in kind of through youth. How was your experience?
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, how was it during getting your doctorate?
Okay. So youth, I was definitely, there's a word, tokenization. So I was like the only black kid in a lot of my courses growing up. That experience was definitely different, but I didn't see like, it was just happening, right? And that's how life was happening. When I would come home and say like, oh, this made me feel weird to like my parents, they were like, okay, like you're in school, like what else, right? But again, their experience, like when they read about slavery or they read about the Haitian Revolution or so on and so forth, they were around people that looked like them. So it was kind of like everyone was kind of having the same reactions. And so like if, I'm assuming when someone read the N-word in class, it was just that. But for me, it was like hearing a white kid say the N-word, and it was like, why is it necessary for us to like have to read that word? And definitely was more sensitive to it when I was younger than as I grew up, because I realized like it was a word in the book that they had to read. But like going through that, I was kind of like, why? For what?
I mean,
like,
even to this day, why? For what?
Right. And so, and especially looking back on it now and like what I've learned about like Christopher Columbus, and like let's learn about like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and George Carver and all of those type of people, and like Malcolm X was like never spoken about, right? Like you would see some things, out of like the corner of your eye, so to say, and you would say like, what, like, what's that? Or like, what are they talking, like Black Panther Party? Like what? And it's like, okay, yep. Like, and
that never happened. It was just this one little thing.
And the idea of like how I programmed history in my head was Martin Luther King passed away. He was doing all these peaceful protests, and he was assassinated, and the world changed. No. Like, all of that took time.
Now.
Right, like all of that took time, and even towards the end of his life, there's a speech and he, I don't want to get the words wrong, but for the sake of time, he basically was saying that he feels wrong for trying to get segregation. He feels wrong for trying to end segregation, because he feels like he's just leading black people like down the wrong path continuously, because like they're not being accepted by white people. But like that wasn't discussed, and that's still not discussed or talked about.
It's the first time I'm hearing it, and it ain't a lie.
And but like especially as you've seen with like, I'm not going to name brands, but like all the other companies that like support like Martin Luther King or follow his way, like there was protests and riots and looting, and people are like, follow Dr. Martin Luther King's way, and I'm like, oh, now y'all want to use him. But like, or you want to use him for like your Black History Month like initiative, but like there are other black people that did things, but it's like only these
Only
like
the
certain,
good one, the one
only
that played by our
the good
rules.
ones, but like y'all killed the good ones too.
Right. So since that was your adolescent, how was being an adult at a PWI?
I realized very quickly the people that I grew up with and that I like held in my inner circle were drastically different than the rest of the world. I would props Lynn, Massachusetts for being diverse, and at least people were able to like see other black people and know other ethnicities and cultures and other traditions and so on and so forth. I was meeting people in college that have never met a black person in person before, or never had like a black friend, or didn't realize like black people also like went to school. One of the things that I was asked is if I was like what my position was, when was the game,
Wow.
and if I had a full like basketball scholarship. And when I said no, they were like, how are you here? And they're like, oh, academic. And I was like, no. And they're like, so how are you paying? And I was like,
With money.
I like
you.
the same way that you're paying, like my
Check.
parents are paying it, like, and they're like, oh, okay. And you're from Lynn? I'm like, yes, yeah, education's important to us. Interesting. There were other like little nuances that like when you like try to help a friend out and like let them like either copy your notes or tell them the answer to like certain like questions that they were struggling with, like whether that be like with homework or so on and so forth, and they wouldn't come to you until after like you were either praised by the teacher or they like actually seen the marks on your grades. So like there were certain people and yeah that wouldn't like come to me for like advice or whatnot.
Better for you.
Right, and that was interesting, especially that I was like trying to help other people, like because you scratch my back, I'm gonna scratch yours, and so it's like, oh, okay, like you helped me out with this question like last week, like I know it, why didn't you ask me? And they're like, oh, like you know, so very like there was a lot more microaggressions and just like flat out ignorance. Yeah.
I like that you said microaggressions, because what I have said to some people, you know, there's this big PWI versus HBCU debate that happens. The only argument, because I also went to a PWI, that I say is it equipped me for the microaggressions and taught me how to fight back in their language in corporate. But for a lot of people who attended a PWI, they still have some regrets for not going to an HBCU to make it more comfortable for themselves. What side of the debate do you land on, and do you even think it's a debate worth having?
Loaded question. So I too like had dreams and whatnot of like attending an HBCU, or even like now because of like Twitter and Instagram you see these like predominantly black high schools and you're like, that looks so lit. Like that was your high school experience. Like it looks like it should be like in a movie or on TV. And these are like just a kid on Snapchat. Like, oh yeah, this is my high school. Like we had another like pep rally or whatever. Like this like game day. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that looks like very inviting, very so on and so forth. And so would that have made the I feel like the debate is not worth having because like similar to what you were saying, that like it equipped you with the language to do that. And so I think a lot of people that attend HBCUs either have already come equipped to the HBCU with that, or they learn how like ignorant those things like are from jump. And so like I learned about a lot of like microaggressions, micro invalidations, micro insults also during like grad school. So I have my master's degree, so I did 3 years with that, and then my doctorate degree I did 4 years with that. So that's where I experienced even more that like, now that I'm reaching this like upper echelon of a level, like the little side eyes, the like comments, and the like hypervigilance of like just being a black man in that position was definitely more prominent then than it was in college. It was kind of like, oh yeah, like that's cute, like you're doing the college thing, and other people are like, are you sure you can do that? Like you're sure you're gonna go to grad school? You're sure you want to be a doctor in psychology? Like shouldn't you pick a field that's more, you know, like fruitful? and so on and so nursing degree or like an actual doctorate in medicine, and it's like, no, doctorate in psychology will do me just fine since that's what I want to do. But to your point, I feel like both people can come equipped, and what I found with HBCU grads is that they feel more confident in those positions, right? There's no like imposter syndrome that goes on there. They've definitely felt more deserving of the positions that they're in because of the backing that they got from the HBCU. Unlike the PWIs, there may not be that backing, right? Or that like constant, like, I know that I can do this, which again is different from my experience because growing up first generation and having family back in Haiti, like I knew black people could be presidents, black people could be CEOs, black people could do all of these like 1%ers type of jobs, whereas like in America that's not often advertised. And so my parents, going back to what we discussed earlier, they're like, okay, some kid was being racist or said the N-word or called you a Tootsie Roll, which is like
A Tootsie Roll.
A Tootsie Roll. Kids. So like what is that, like what is that going to do? Like, you're not going to fight them, you're there for school, we didn't send you to school for friends, like, so get that. And then that became my attitude, that like I'm not here for everybody else. And when it slipped up or like those experiences tended to happen more when you were like trying to be friends or welcoming of people into your space. And so I'd learned to like keep people and keep my boundaries there. But then that results in you being like the standoffish or the angry black man. So it's kind of like a catch-22. But the HBCU prepares you for that. So like even things that like I didn't figure out, maybe if I went to an HBCU and they were teaching me about these things more heavily, then I would know that like, okay, like all of their comments and their language and their body language is just going to lead to this. I didn't realize that, and I was like giving more chances rather than, let's say I graduated from an HBCU, I would have already known how this person is talking, and just by the language, people like, they're like, oh, you're so articulate. Like, you're from there? Wow, that sounds like so good. Like, good for you being a black man here. Not like genuinely proud, but like, oh, we don't see that before. Yeah, like.
Breaking the norm.
Exactly.
Being the token.
And so, like they prepare you for that, it appears. And I don't know if PWIs do the work that is necessary to prepare you to continue on within that culture, right? And then I'm sure they go through their own stuff, right? And as far like as an institution, they can't function without being in the dominant white culture. So there's things, I'm sure, when we think about like funding, right, for the HBCU, that it still runs into some sort of like institutional racist stuff that continues to occur, because it's not like they're in a silo and they're only like functioning off of Black America. Like, their money comes from the Board of Education, I would presume, as everyone else. So although it would be great and awesome to attend an HBCU, and definitely what a mission it would be like now to do that, I've definitely had HBCU grads, and I've had like Harvard graduates, and we're all in the same class, like during the doctorate program, right? So it's like, or you end up at the same like job, or so on and so forth. So like, it depends on what you want your experience to be. I didn't learn about a HBCU until college, after I already transferred once. So my parents won't let me transfer again.
To close out, what impact do you want your research to have on Black doctorate students in clinical psychology programs?
So one big finding was that mentorship is a significant factor in having Black students stay and continue and be successful in these programs. And so I would want them to know that to find a mentor and to be engaged in these, to simply be engaged in their experience at these universities, whether that be a PWI or HBCU. As long as you have like mentorship, you have there are other like protective factors like family, religion, money ended up of course being a protective factor. Like when you have these things in place, you'll be able to feel like you can progress forward. It's only then that you'll be able to do those things. You can't like just do it on your own, which it does feel like that. But if you have a mentorship, a mentor, or you're a part of like some sort of like mentorship program, it is the best way that my research at least has found, and many other researchers that like I researched during my dissertation to to be a part of those type of environments in order to get you to where you need to go in the doctorate program, and just to know that like, oh, somebody else completed their dissertation, so can I. That it's not this like end all be all. It's just the beginning, as often people say.
And since this work can be heavy for you, what does your self-care routine look like?
Ooh, self-care. So part of that is continued mentorship, right, with the people that were mentoring me before. I'm in constant contact with them. I would say being around my friends and my family is important. I can tend to be the serious guy, or the guy constantly going, and so being able to get out of my element, be more laid back, dance, have fun, turn up with my friends is definitely important. My religion still plays a big piece in my life, and so attending church and doing those things that I do constantly. But that self-care is important, and being like genuinely nice to yourself, right? If you're like if you're name calling yourself and being negative because like you didn't finish this project on time, or you gave up a project that like you could have like made money on, X, Y, and Z, like that is all fine and necessary in order for you to like continue and to protect yourself. And so as like the black man becomes a continued endangered species, we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and doing that. And so therapy as well. And so whatever way that we can find some sort of solace and peace, we need to do that. And crying, right? So making sure that we are crying when the tears are present, and allowing those things to happen.
So to switch gears, since I can't ask another question for the way that you answered that one, because BlackMenCryToo, give me 3 songs that you listen to get you in or out of any mood. So whether you're angry, you're excited.
Wow.
Are you gonna go for a run? Whatever, 3.
Okay.
It's the hardest question I've asked.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Crew.
Listen to that on the way here.
Is always positive vibes. Love that song. Let Go, Let God is, it goes there, is what I'll leave it at. And another song.
We have positive vibes, we have religious vibes.
I by Kendrick Lamar. What's the full song? I know a song called I. Yeah, We Gonna Be Alright. Yeah, We Gonna Be Alright is that. Yeah. Oh, Mad. I have to add. Mad is my special.
Is it Solange?
Yes.
Okay.
That needs to.
That
needs
whole,
to be on that whole.
A Seat at the Table project.
Yes, A Seat at the Table has been revisited since the pandemic.
Numerous times. Yeah.
Monthly.
Same.
Like let the whole thing rock. Yeah.
So normally I typically ask, what message would you leave the youth with? But since that is a part of your work, I will ask, how has your work impacted your outlook on being a black man?
Ooh, how's my work impact? That we are also like caring and compassionate and sensitive. I feel like that allows other people, other black men, other young Black men to see that like them too could have somebody who is caring, compassionate, sensitive towards them, right, and about them and about their feelings and about their well-being. And so I don't take it for granted when I do have any patients at that, but Black patients as well, and Black male patients, because they are stereotypically not involved in therapy, and when they are, you want to promote that, you want to foster that, you want to be compassionate to that, and that too is important. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for tuning into this very special episode of Black Men Cry Too. As per usual, you can follow us and join the conversation by following at BlackMenCryToo, TOO, and that's on Instagram and YouTube. Thank you for tuning in again. Thanks, Al.
No problem. Peace.